And it's subtle. But the more that we're conscious and present in life, the more we're not run by these things, you understand. The more we're in a moment and just realizing something's happening and that I am more than this, and that there's a presence and a power that lives within and as me that is triumphant over any circumstance and condition in my life, but I got to be present in my life, you know? Like one's microphone going out in the middle of service. All of a sudden, no, check this out. Like, that's an enemy of mine all of a sudden. Like, really? Now? Right in the middle of service. And then Jonathan comes forward, and I'm in my head, I'm like, oh my God, this is so unprofessional. But it's nothing, right? It's nothing. It's nothing. And how many times in my life have I been caught up by something that is really nothing? And even the somethings that might be something, are they something? I mean, look at life now. Just kind of take an inventory of your life right now and look back and think, as I sit now, was that something really something? What am I giving my attention to? You know, when Jesus said, love your enemy, it was revolutionary. It wasn't just an interesting idea back then. We know what was happening when Jesus was alive, right? Who had occupied his homeland? The Romans, right? I feel like we've talked about this not too long ago, but anyway, indulge me. I'm going to do it again a little bit. But consider what's occupying you. Like, it wasn't just, oh, love your enemy because I think it's a good idea and, you know, practice it if you can. His homeland was being occupied by a force that they didn't want to have there. And in the midst of that, Jesus is saying, love these people. Consider now, I wasn't around during the civil rights movement. But I think how hard it must have been. Somehow, I don't think it was easy for Dr. King. Let's be clear on that, all right? Let's create a context. I don't think it was easy for Dr. King. But here's Dr. King out in the lead, and he's like, everybody, listen. Listen. We can't fight. We're going to fight in a different way. It is time now for, he even says it in one of his sermons. I wish I could just like instantaneously. We're going to get to that point where I can just beep, and it'll play over some loudspeaker someplace in the world. We'll just have, I hope at some point we can all just walk out of our homes, like when we walk out of our home this morning, we have any morning, we have our own theme music that just starts playing. We're like, yeah, I'm ready to get after the world, you know, let's go. But it's in one sermon Dr. King gives, and I actually played this a little over a year ago, I think when we were still down in the hotel. He says, it is now time for nonviolence or non-existence. Nonviolence or non-existence. How hard it must have been for Dr. King to stand in front of those people. And you know, when something unjust is happening to you, consider how upset I get. You charged me how much? It didn't cost that, right? And this is what happens inside. I mean, we're talking about justice now. We're talking about livelihood. We're talking about people's very existence. We're talking about existential beingness. And how challenging it must have been for Jesus to say, love these people, and how hard it must be to hear that message. To hear that, like, what? You want me to love my enemies? You want me to practice nonviolence when, see, the images that I have from the civil rights movement, I have images from TV. This is what I have. I have video images, right? I've seen some things in my life, but when I think about the civil rights movement and some of these things and people being whipped and attacked by dogs and all of these things, right? And it's like, and here in the midst of that is a message saying, don't fight back. There's a different way that we're going to triumph through this. This is revolutionary, right? It's a revolution of one's soul. It's a revolution of one's heart. Now, I think in my life, generally, it's pretty protected. I mean, I have to look at it in the context. My life is pretty protected, and the injustices that I face, or the loving my enemies, the enemies in my life are, most of them are, it all exists up here. And for most of us, the enemies in our lives exist up here. Now, there's been a lot of opportunity for a lot of people, because I hear it from a lot of people, to have enemies right now. Political enemies. Idea enemies, whatever, enemies, and there's all, but and people we're not even going to get it to talk anymore. You know, to sit down and have civil discourse about things, to actually share different points of view, to actually love your enemy is to say, this is one of the things I practice when people, you know, like when folks say, hey, I don't even want to talk to them, or I don't even want to have anything to do with them. Why not? Why not? What am I so, and where does it come from, gang? Where does enemy come from? Enemy comes from, most of the time, it comes from a place of fear. I am afraid. And how does fear mask itself? Ooh, I'm going to kick some ass. Anger. Retribution. Let's stomp some heads. I'm going to whoop some ass. That's how it, you know, that's in my head. That's how, you know, it shows up differently for different people. It sounds different. It looks different. All you get it, right? But what's really going on inside of me is I'm afraid. And one of the things that I've really wanted to practice, me and my buddy Jacob Jardine, we used to call ourselves amateur sociologists. We would just go through life, and we would just go, you know, we wanted to like go on a expedition down in South America, and you know, we're like in our early 20s, and we're like, we're just going to go for it. We just want to experience the world and put ourselves in these positions. And I remember talking to one of my sociology professors at community college in Seattle. I was like, that's a great idea, but you might just want to plan a little bit, okay? Just plan your trip just a little bit, so you just, you know, get a plane ticket and dump yourself someplace in the middle of South America and try and figure out who you are. Like, okay, well, I actually did that years later in Africa and Europe and Turkey and some other places. I mean, I still had some people around me that I love, but like to go put ourselves in, I wanted to put myself in a position where nobody knew me and where I didn't know anybody, and I wanted to see what I was made of. And in doing that, we have to talk. And then when there's language barriers and things like that, we get really interesting as far as how we're communicating and things like this, right? But I didn't want to live in a world where it felt like an enemy. I wanted to live in a world where it felt like friendship. You know, where Paramahansa Yogananda talks about a galaxy of friendship. You know, so Jacob and I would put ourselves in these positions just around Seattle, where we're exposing ourselves to different ideas and to different things to create friendship, to create community, to create love, to find out who our enemies are. And I'm gonna actually share and I don't know what I've shared or haven't shared in here anymore, so you'll let me know after the service if I've already shared this, right?
Gotcha, brother.
Thank you. Sometimes I think back, have I already given that sermon? I don't know. I don't keep, I already have, right? John, there's only one sermon. We find different ways of giving it. So anyway, I'm at this show, right? I'm at a hip hop show, and I can't believe this is one of those things I'm going to get home and I'm going to be like, why in the world did you share that? Oh my God, I sometimes just feel so exposed on Sunday mornings, but whatever. This is a something that isn't really a something. I've done enough life at this point that it's like, what really means much anymore anyway? Love is what means something. So we're at this show, and now I'm building it up so much, you're probably going to all be let down. Not that big of a deal. No, we're at this show, and so it's a mixed race. There's a whole lot of, I probably would say that there were more black people than there were white people at this particular show. And I was in my early 20s, and I was confused, and I was lost, and I didn't know what was going on, but this is one of the keenest learning moments for me. And I was standing next to this black dude, and he was about this tall. And we're just hanging out there and this and that, and we actually accidentally bumped into each other, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I looked at him, and I go, what? You have a problem with white people? Yeah, I know. Hey, this was a long time ago. This was a long time ago. I said that. I said, Roy, do you have a problem with white people? This is the entertainment part. I'm keeping you in it. And he just looks at me and he goes, basically like that. And then just carried on with his evening. I was sharing with this you, wasn't I? Was I sharing this with you? You haven't heard this? Oh.
Those short-term memories. Always do.
And it's so dig it, in that moment, I don't know what was going on with me, but in that moment, that guy was my enemy. But you know what was really going on in that moment is I was my own worst enemy. And here's what happened after that. I woke up the next morning in such profound shame. I was in this deep and profound, I've never seen this guy again. What I wanted to do, all I wanted to do after crying through my tears, because see, even in our foibles, we can learn something. Even in those great, what I would call a mistake, but I can't look back at my life and say that was a mistake. Because something happened inside of me that cracked me wide open. I don't even know where that was coming from. Like he was probably looking at me like, me having a problem with you? You're white, dude. You have a problem with me. You know, just as far as generalizations are concerned, it was all weird. And so I woke up the next morning and I'm like, just filled with shame, filled with embarrassment, filled with, oh my God, like, I'm out in the world and this is how I'm behaving and this is how I'm showing up. Like, what's in my consciousness? What's in my awareness? That I didn't even know that lived inside of me. I didn't even know it was in there. And then it comes out and it's like, what? So in that moment, I had an opportunity. It actually helped heal, because I still prescribe, and you might not want to hear this. There's racism that lives within all of us. We have racism that lives within us, and you might want to say you don't, but it shows up in very subtle ways. When it's systemic, it's a challenge. I didn't know I was going to talk about race this morning, but it's important to address it, because when we address it, when we're aware of it, then we can actually be aware of it and do something about it, right? And as a white male, you know, I'm like at the, you know, anyway, you guys kind of get it. So I just shame. The next day I woke up in just so much shame, and I vowed in that moment, I vowed in that moment, I want to keep my heart open. After the tears of the next morning and waking up, and by the way, I woke up with a hangover too, right? So I wasn't even in my right mind. And you know that story for me. Now, I wasn't in my right mind for a long time until I started getting in my right mind. I started getting some level of the right type of insanity back. The right type of insanity is to just realize that I live in a world where I want to live in a world where no one is my enemy. Where no one is my enemy. And if I don't understand, I want to be the first to talk. I want to be the first to ask questions. I want to be the first to start to investigate, because as soon as that happens, and as soon as I start asking questions of another, as soon as I start asking why, as soon as I start, well, what's happening? Why is it even like this? Why is it constructed this way? Walls start to come down. And that happens, so understand that the one relationship that we have is the one with ourselves. And then everything else is a projection of that. I've shared this with you before. We have a relationship with ourselves, and then we project out of that. So the enemies that we have are all within ourselves. And the invitation of this morning is to start becoming aware of who and what they really are. And what can I do about them? How can I address it? How can I find compassion within me to start addressing these things so that I'm creating a greater experience of friendship? I know what it's like to walk in a room with my guard up. I don't know any of these people. What are they going to say? What are they going to do? How are they going to behave? What are they going to do to me? Am I safe? And I also know what it feels like to walk into a room with my heart wide open. And is it vulnerable and is it scary? Yeah, it can be. But is it healing? And does something magnificent happen? 100%. 100%. This was revolutionary when Jesus said this. And it hadn't been, you know, if you look at the Bible, there's the Old Testament, which is what? An eye for a... And then this idea, and if you look at it from the standpoint of growth in consciousness, we look at this in our own lives. There can be an Old Testament of our own lives, and then a New Testament of our own lives. An Old Testament of an eye for an eye. This is what I was taught on the playgrounds. This is maybe what my parents taught me. This is what teachers taught me. This is kind of what I learned. Perhaps an eye for an eye. If somebody comes at you, you better be ready, right? And then there's a New Testament part of our lives. Love your perceived enemies. The enemies within. The enemies that live within us, where I other people, where I make people wrong. And then I could say, but they are wrong. No, they are wrong. No, they're not. We're just all out here doing this thing, right? And some of us have a little bit more ignorance in certain areas, and some of us have some enlightenment in some areas, but what we're doing is waking up. So I want us to take stock this week. Consider the enemies that you live with. And I don't want to hear, so don't come tell me, that we don't have any. Most of us do. And I don't know what yours are, and you don't know what mine are. And that's not the point here. It's just to get present to where are the enemies that live within. And how can I bring them in? You know, like, I also remember one time when I was heartbroken as a little kid, and this is the image that I have. I was heartbroken as a little kid, and we were driving down the side. It was me and my brother and my sister, and I was crying for some reason, and my brother was making fun of me, because that's what, you know, siblings do sometimes. And my mom, we're driving down I-5 between Seattle, this is how I remember it, we're between Seattle and Olympia, and my mom pulls the car over on the side of the interstate. And she says, "Come here, Chase." And that's not an allowance for you guys to call me Chase. No permission granted. She says, "Come here, Chase," and she just puts me in her lap and she holds me for a few minutes. "Thank you, Mary," exactly. That is the image of bringing something into your heart. The image of that mother presence, the image of that divine father-mother presence, the image that each one of us have, the capacity that each one of us have to bring that sadness, to bring that fear, to bring that scarcity, to bring that otherness, to bring that wrongness, to bring that finger pointing into our heart space. This is ferocious work, gang. You understand, right? This is not for the soft or for the weary. This is ferocious work. To bring all of those things into your heart space and hug it. And hug it. And say, you may feel lost, you may feel alone, you may feel like othering, you may feel scared, but we bring it all into our heart space and something happens. You call it a miracle, a transformation, a revolution, a revelation. Where we realize that we're safe and that all is well and that there's a divine presence that lives at the very center of each one of us. There's a divine presence that lives in the middle of us that heals. And that if I'm in lockstep with it, if I'm prayed up, if I'm meditated up, if I'm studied up, if I'm communityed up, if I'm doing my spiritual work, that I'm at a place of being a healing station of radiation of that love. My antennas are up so that I'm aware of what I consider to be or conceive as my enemies, and I'm bringing them right into my heart space, and I become this recycling factory. I become this bringing in rubbish, and out comes gold, out comes something I can use. I bring in rubbish, and out comes something that's useful, a life that's useful. And more than anything, what we experience is a freedom within ourselves. What we experience is not that fear of contraction, but that expansion of love. And then we move around this place called Santa Fe. We move around this town. We move around in our communities. We move around in places where we feel safe, and then in places where we don't feel safe, and we find ourselves a little more free. We find ourselves a little bit more in love. We find ourselves loving people that we were otherwise afraid of, just even a day before, just even a moment before. Something that Paramahansa Yogananda also talks about in here is that there is a time and a place to love your enemy from afar. from afar. That we don't necessarily have to, right? Take that person out to brunch. What's even the line that's in here? Oh, it is not necessary, he says. It is not necessary to mix with one's enemies. It is not necessary to mix with one's enemies. It is often better to love them from a distance, unless by acts of kindly association, one's love can affect a change in those persons. So we're not called or told how to love or how it shows up, simply to love, to be the presence, to be the power, to be the love. So you know if it's safe for you to be engaged, or is it better to love from afar? But that's still love. Because if I feel like I have to mix it up, I have to get involved, I have to get engaged, but I can't be in a place of love, then what's being accomplished? You with me? So sometimes the blessing from afar is a good thing. So back to the original question during our spiritual practice. Back to the original question. Who are your perceived enemies right now, and what can we do about it? This isn't somebody else's inventory to take. This is yours. Who are they? What are they? What is it? And to begin to consider, again, this is a question posed for the week's worth of work, for the week's worth of activity this week. Loving your enemies isn't getting on the phone and talking about how messed up their life is, how messed up that person is. That's not loving your enemy. Loving your enemy from afar would be not even talking about it then. Don't even talk about them. This is not for the faint of heart, gang. Love your enemies. Revolutionary. Who is occupying your space? Who, as they say, I don't know if I've only heard it in a sports context, but who's living rent-free? Rent-free in your head. And you're allowing them to. Time to be the landlord of your own consciousness. Love. Love moves them right out into their own space. Love heals us and sets us free. So as we pray together this morning to wrap this up, consider again, who are your enemies? And how can that presence and that power and that love emerge from within you to set you free? There's an F word that's coming to mind. What's that F word that's coming to mind that is so important in our practice? The F word is? Yes. Yes to all of that. And I am in this moment particularly thinking about forgiveness. Forgiveness. What does forgiveness do? It gives me my life and sets everybody else free. I know there is a power and a presence and a love that is the living Spirit of God Almighty, indestructible and absolute. It is the presence that is living itself in, through, and as each one of us. It's not the pie in the sky, the presence and the power that's someplace over there. It's right where we are. That is one of the most, if we could slow down. A body of work over a lifetime to integrate as a human consciousness that the power and the presence and the love of God is right where we are, not somewhere else. That would be a worthy life. Not somewhere else. Not beseeching, not asking your parents for your good, but staking a claim for it. That is the truth within which we live. That is the power and the presence within which we live and move and have our being. And it is revealing itself as each one of us this morning, right now. Exactly the way we look, exactly the way we smell, and exactly the way that love is having its way through and as each one of us. Living, moving, and having its being as each one of us now. You can continue to hate your enemies if you want to, but I'm telling you right now, to be free To truly be free is to love. To truly set ourselves free to enjoy a greater experience of happiness and freedom and beauty, to have eyes to see and a heart that perceives goodness and love and joy is the work that's before us. Freedom is the work that's before us. Setting us free. I'm grateful for this time that we share. I'm grateful for the Word. I'm grateful for our community coming together to explore life-giving ideas, to explore life-giving, nurturing ideas. And then because of that, this community, we have power in our greater community. We have light. We are light. We are light. Lighting up every man, woman, child, all life that we come in contact with. I'm grateful for this time that we share. I recognize it as good. I call it good, and so it is. Amen.